Well, hello. Welcome back to the Ask Abhijit show. Good evening and good day to all of you, wherever you are in the world. It's great to see you all again. I'm going to take questions today from the live chat, from the super chat, and we're going to do as many as possible. But before that, let's see who all is there on the live chat. Let me greet as many of you as I can quickly. I can see Shri Ramachandraya Namaha. I can see Divya Ranganath. I can see Savaria Seth, Ayush Singh, Spurti Uturi. Savaria Seth again, Ayush Singh, Geopolitical Dubey from Indore, Daksh, Pranay Paul from Kolkata, Anant Pai, Satellite, Suhas Reddy, Project Smiling Buddha, Lakshay, Tanshu Mehta from Gujarat, welcome, Shashank Kaushik, welcome back, Sagar Thorat, Ayush Singh again, Ram Shukla from Kanpur, well, good evening, HB Ashutosh Kumar, Ashu Gotham, Soumya Datta, Explorer 1, Kapalane, Rashmi Rathore from Rajasthan, good evening. Suhas Reddy from Bangalore, good evening, Bangalore. Sumit Rana, Vedant Shukla, Arindam Das, Sagar Thorat, Uju, who else? Dadi Tashi Beast, Vamshi Kalem, Akash B.A., Rashik Uddin, Suhas Reddy from Bangalore, Animesh Paul, Ansh Pratap Singh, Gaurish KB from Dublin, McLevin Ramram, Ashutosh Kumar, Ayush Yadav, Vedant Shukla, Shashank again, Sagar Thorat, Suran, Brian, Stellar, Opai. Who else do we have? Karan Singh Rathore, Animesh, Chat DSP, Shikazu, Patrick the Keller, Alka Shikari, Master DDs, etc. Uju has missed 2 weeks, but welcome back, sir. Aparna Saha, Shri Ansh Shukla, and everybody else. Okay, so I'm going to take questions about geopolitics today so that we are focused on one topic. Let's do that, right? So please get going. Let's see what questions you all have. I'll answer as many as I can, and I will prioritize super chats if there are any, but we'll take as many as we can. All right. So Soldier Boy says we need to suffer. We need to suffer for 20 years. Can you please clarify what kind of pain, what type of pain I was talking about? So I was talking about the fact that uh, we know what's happening right now. Shri Donald Trump is imposing sanctions, or not sanctions, but tariffs on India, 25% tariffs, which is going to make life difficult for India from a economic perspective, trading perspective. The US is one of our major trading partners, and now our goods will be priced at uncompetitive rates in the US. So it's going to be not so good for our economy. And if you see my last episode of Geostrategy, in that I have shown how it's going to affect our GDP, roughly, a rough ballpark analysis of that. And Trump is threatening even more tariffs, punitive tariffs, because we are trading with Russia, because we are purchasing Russian oil and so on. And the US sees India as a long-term adversary because India is growing. India has naturally been at the top of the totem pole when it comes to the global economies. India has always been the largest economy historically for the past 2000 years. There's been a blip in between, some 300 years or so, when we were under European occupation, right, when they destroyed our economy. But we are rising again. And they don't want us to rise. So they're going to do everything they can, the Americans. Okay. And you have to understand that's what any great power will do. Any great power will try to ensure that any rising power will be nipped in the bud and it doesn't become a threat long term. So that's what they're going to do. They're going to try their best to clip our wings and ideally, from their perspective, to turn India into a vassal state. So it'll all depend on the quality of India's leadership. Right now, we have good leadership. Well, let's see how it goes going forward. So that's what I'm talking about. 20 years of pain. If we can somehow go through those 20 years without caving in, without becoming a vassal, without engaging, without getting drawn into a major conflict somewhere, then we're going to be a 15-20 trillion dollar economy. We're going to be a whole different beast, and then it's going to be very hard for anybody to mess with us. So it's a question of about 20 years, and those 20 years will be tough. So that's what I mean by that. Okay. Rohan Suneja says, what will happen to Armenia if Iran falls in war? Well, life will be difficult for Armenia. So let's take a look at the map to understand what we are talking about here. Let's see the map, because the map gives us a lot of information that otherwise we won't understand. So we are talking about a nation in the Caucasus region, which is Armenia. It's a landlocked nation currently. It used to be a much larger kingdom in the past. All of Azerbaijan was once part of the kingdom of Armenia. But yeah, this is where we are today. And you can see that there's parts of Armenia that the Azerbaijanis have taken over. See, it's now Azerbaijan. Google officially recognizes these regions as part of Azerbaijan now. It wasn't the case earlier. Uh, so, and Armenia is a nation that has suffered terribly at the hands of Turkey in the past. The Armenian genocide, which Turkey refuses to recognize as a fact, but it is a fact, right? We know that there are multiple waves of the Armenian genocide starting in the last quarter of the 19th century. And the last major wave of the Armenian genocide, the hammer blow, was around 1915 or so. You can look up the history to see the exact details and exact dates. So Armenia has suffered tremendously at the hands of the Turks, and Azerbaijan is a very staunch Turkish ally. It's a Turkic, culturally Turkic nation. Okay, and the two nations, Turkey and Azerbaijan, would like to wipe Armenia off the map of the world. In Armenia, well, right now it has a few allies. It's interesting that Israel is aligned with Turkey for its own geopolitical reasons and against Armenia, and Iran is supporting Armenia. India is supporting Armenia. So you have a Hindu nation, a Sunni, a Shia Islamic nation, both teaming up to support a Christian nation, Armenia. It's very strange, but it's interesting. So and India is supplying various kinds of weapon systems to Armenia, like the Pinaka multi-barrel rocket system, Swati radars, and whatever else we are supplying to Armenia. And we are typically doing this by transshipping the weapons packages via Iran by road. Okay. Now, if Iran, one of the major allies of Armenia, were to fall in the war, Armenia will be in deep, deep, deep trouble, seriously deep trouble. And it may end up being wiped off the map of the world. So it's very important from Armenia's perspective, that Iran continues to survive and it continues to exist and does not fall in any war. So I hope that explains the situation. Right now, we have Zishan Gaming who says, now that Trump and even the Indian opposition leader have said that India lost 5 jets to the Pakistan Air Force, are you willing to admit that that's what actually occurs? So if Trump says something, I'm supposed to admit because the white man said that, and somebody else said that, somebody else made an allegation. Do you have evidence of this? Are you willing to admit? Are you Indian? Are you Pakistani? What are you exactly? Not sure. All right. What next do we have? Feminist Slayer, quite a name, says, can green hydrogen, solar, and other renewables make India self-sufficient in terms of energy, or is nuclear the future? Are there any other alternatives to explore? Okay, green hydrogen, it's hydrogen gas, and you're producing it via green means, which means means that are not harmful to the environment. That's what we mean by green hydrogen. It's produced in a sustainable manner, in a way that doesn't harm the environment. That's green hydrogen. So we have green hydrogen, which is hydrogen gas, which we will combust with oxygen to produce by water vapor and energy. That's one. Solar energy, which produces electricity. Other renewables like wind energy and geothermal energy and hydroelectric energy and so on and so forth. These are renewables. Are all of these renewables sufficient to make India self-sufficient in terms of energy? Or do we need to add nuclear in the mix? I think nuclear is a great option. It's a very clean form of energy as long as we do it properly, right? We have had a few issues outside of India. We've had Chernobyl. We've had 3 Mile Island in the US, which was a nuclear accident. We've had Fukushima in Japan as a consequence of the 2011 disastrous earthquake. And maybe a smattering of other incidents. But overall, nuclear energy is extremely safe as long as you know what you're doing and you know how to handle it. So I think nuclear energy, so nuclear energy is another factor that we can use. Are there other alternatives to explore? Green alternatives. Well, there's hydroelectric, there's geothermal and wind energy. I suppose there could be some more. There's waves, waves, tidal waves, and all. Not just tidal waves, but just regular waves in the sea that you can use to you can put buoys there, and the up and down going of the buoy can be used to generate electricity. There's a whole lot of creative ways in which you can generate electricity and energy, but those all of those depend on the climate, on the weather, on capricious factors that are not under your control. Solar, for example, only half of the time you will get energy because at night time there's no solar energy. Wind energy depends on the winds. Geothermal depends on whether there's other factors. Uh, so all of these other forms of energy, they depend on factors that are not under our control. Uh, Nuclear energy, it's entirely under our control. Uh, so I think nuclear energy needs to be a major component of our energy strategy going forward. But the real question is, can we entirely do away with fossil fuels, oil and gas? That's the big question. Is it even possible to do that? Let's say you have to fight a war, unfortunately. You have fighter planes, right? Can you power fighter planes with hydroelectric energy? I mean, yeah, with the lithium ion batteries. You can't. You need fossil fuels for that. So I think fossil fuels are still very much an integral component of any nation's energy strategy. Long term, we'll see how it goes. So that's why I would say that because of the capricious, uncertain nature of solar, other renewables, etc., it's better. It's always a good strategy, good strategy to have something like something you can control entirely, like nuclear energy, even green hydrogen. Yeah. Okay. I am Koshik says, okay, this is not geopolitics. I'm so sorry, but I've said it very clearly. It's geopolitics. I really appreciate the fact that you're asking me questions, but today is not the day for physics questions. Please understand, sir. Please. Today I've put a pinned comment saying that today is a geopolitics live stream. Okay, so today the audience is here to see geopolitics because that's what I've announced. So we will not let the audience down. And yeah, so there we go. Varun Sood says, what will be the impact of Trump's tariffs on the software sector? Why are we not able to build companies like AWS that could have protected our data integrity? We could have led as Alibaba is the only big player here from Asia. What's going to be the impact of Trump's tariffs? It depends. First of all, right now he's announced 25% tariffs. He's also threatening more additional punitive tariffs because we are trading with Russia. There's this bill by Lindsey Graham that threatens 500% tariffs to nations that are purchasing Russian oil. So it's all going to depend on how it goes. We are still engaged in trade negotiations with the Americans, and Trump is very miffed for a variety of reasons with India. Uh, but assuming it's going to stay at 25%, I have not done an analysis of the software sector particularly specifically, that what's going to be the impact of the software sector. But overall it's going to have an impact of about a deleterious negative impact on the Indian GDP growth over the next year, which is about 0.2 to 0.4%. 0.2 to 0.4% ballpark rough figure I'm giving you. So the RBI has forecast, okay, that the Indian GDP will grow at about 6.5%, let's say, over the next year. So the Trump tariffs will bring it down to either 6.3 or 6.1%, which is not good, right? That's what I can tell you. I haven't seen the impact of the software sector. For that, I'll have to sit down and do some number crunching and all that. I'll have to see what was the total volume of trade software exports from India to the US. How much was the revenue for India over the past year, right? And assuming 25% hike, and then what's the effect? I'll have to do some calculations. I don't know right now. I've not done that. But you get the point. Right? So if you are charging, for example, if I am a software company, old fashioned labor arbitrage software company, and I'm hiring Indian programmers at piteous salaries, and I'm billing the American clients $20 an hour, let's say, okay, for the work they are doing, my software employees are doing. So if it's $20 an hour, then with 25% hike on that, what's 25% of $20? It's $5, right? One fourth, $5. So now it's gonna cost about 25. You can do that sort of calculation. Maybe that's not the right way to do it, but you get the point. So it's gonna be it's gonna be tougher for India. That's the kind of effect it's gonna have. Why aren't we able to build companies like AWS? I think it's a kind of question I took yesterday. It's because uh, all these Indian corporations don't have the appetite for risk. They don't want to innovate. They're getting money the old fashioned way by engaging in labor arbitrage. They just happy with it. They have no desire to innovate. It's so sad to see this, the kind of people who are running these corporations. Absolutely. We've had so many gigantic Indian software companies the past several decades, right? All working for American clients. How many software products, new software products, have the Indian companies created? How many Facebooks, how many LinkedIn's, how many Twitters, how many apps, how many uh, original pieces of software? What have we created? We've done nothing whatsoever. With all this huge pool of talent, we have only done software arbitrage, labor arbitrage. It's pathetic, the kind of mindset these people have who are running these companies. So that's why it's not like we can't do it. But obviously, when you are trying to create new products and market those products, it's risky. The payoff could be huge, but the risk also is there. It's also, you stand to lose money sometimes, right? So they don't want any risk. They've got this tried and tested model of labor arbitrage, which is bringing them money. So they've been okay with that. But now things are bad. Things are bad because of the advent of AI. And in 5 years' time, it's gonna be, who knows, could be curtains for the Indian IT industry. It could be. So it's because of this attitude that we have not been able to build companies like AWS or whatever, because they've never wanted to do something different. Uju says every nation on Big Daddy US's earth as of now suffers from illegal immigration, including the US. The invisible hand speaks a certain language. Well, that is something you claim. I we don't have any evidence that goes in that direction. Okay, so I'm gonna just say, all right, if you say so. Kumar Kanishk says, as India is close to finding massive oil reserves in the Andaman Sea, there are news of American giants like Shell, etc., to acquire Bharat Petroleum. Is this a red flag? I think Bharat Petroleum, is it a government-owned company? Bharat Petroleum, is it a state-owned company? Let's find out. Bharat Petroleum. Petroleum. Is it state-owned? It's a Fortune 500, etc. Indian public sector headquartered. It's the government-owned. It's a government-owned company. It's India's second largest government-owned downstream oil producer. Okay, so Bharat Petroleum is owned by the government of India. If you have heard news of American giants like Shell or whatever trying to acquire this, well, as long as the government of India doesn't want to sell it, it won't work. It won't work like that. It doesn't work like that, right? Now, when it comes to this news of India being close to finding massive oil reserves in the Andaman Sea, well, let's not count our chickens before they hatch. Okay, we haven't seen any actual news of a gigantic oil discovery. So until that news is announced and we actually find something, let's not talk about that. I mean, it's pointless. I have been saying for the longest time myself that, gigantic subcontinent-sized nation like India, it's inconceivable that we won't have gigantic oil reserves in various parts of the country, or of the continental shelf in the ocean. It's inconceivable. But having those reserves hidden somewhere is pointless. We've got to find them, right? And right now, there are people talking about, we are on the verge of making a huge oil discovery. Well, discover it and then talk about it. That's what I would say. Okay. Rashikuddin says, is India cautious about Bangladesh subs? They want 6 more from Korea. You mean Bangladesh's submarines? Bangladesh wants 6 more submarines from Korea. Well, I suppose I suppose you mean South Korea. Well, let the Bangladeshis do whatever they want. That is their It's their internal matter. If they want more submarines, let them buy the submarines. If they acquire the submarines, well, it's going to be a long, drawn out process. And if obviously now Bangladesh is a vassal of the US, it's East Pakistan now. So if they acquire submarines, even though they face no threat for anybody, it means it's a threat to us. So we will obviously take appropriate steps to circumvent such threats and potentially neutralize them if required. So we'll look into that if this happens. Sharva says the Western governments are moving towards censorship under the pretext of kids' safety acts. What are the global repercussions other than mass surveillance? In the UK, protest videos against censored are censored. Okay. Yeah, the Western governments are indeed moving towards censorship. Not so much in the US that much right now, but definitely in nations like the UK and various EU nations, we are witnessing the passing of various laws and rules and regulation. In the UK, you stand to spend more jail time for putting a meme on social media than for actually doing some kind of actual crime. Yeah, some real world crime. So that's the kind of dystopian situation where these nations are moving towards. So if you're in the UK and you post certain things on social media, you go to jail. The cops come and knock on your door, and you are thinking bad thoughts, and you need to go to jail. It's very much like that book, right? The dystopian book by George Orwell, 1984. Um, thought crime, thought crime. So there's absolutely no freedom of speech if you have such laws, right? So censorship is becoming kind of the norm. And I don't know about the Kids Safety Acts. I've not looked into that, but there are various kinds of censorship that are becoming more and more prevalent. What's the global repercussions of this other than mass surveillance? Well, if that infection spreads to other countries, it becomes the whole world becomes a morass of censorship, and people will then have to be very watchful about what they say and what they post on social media and so on. So that means that people will have to take resort to some other measures to express themselves, or maybe they can't express themselves at all. Thankfully, that's not the case in across the entire world. There are still countries where you can, to a reasonable extent, express yourself, right? But if there's this global outbreak of censorship, well, that's bad. It means the world has regressed. It's become more total. It would indicate that the world is becoming a more totalitarian place, a more authoritarian kind of world. And that's not good for everybody, right? It's bad for everybody. You can't have the free exchange of thoughts and ideas. You can't have free and fair dialogue. It's a good practice for people with opposing views to be able to speak freely and have a dialogue so that they understand each other's perspectives. That's what you have in a free and open world. That's what the West calls the liberal world order, but they are in the process of dismantling it, which is unfortunate. Yeah, so the UK seems to be the flag bearer of all these things right now, which is, well, unfortunate, isn't it? Joshua Lawrence says 150. Well, all right, sir, and thank you for your contribution. Rohan Suneja says, my views on the shameless BCCI playing cricket with Pakistan. Well, I have made it very clear that I am not in favor of playing anything, any kind of sporting. There should be no sporting contact with Pakistan. Look, do you remember, folks, South Africa was banned from participating in international sports for more than 2 decades because of their policy of practicing apartheid, of treating their majority population as second-class citizens. Right, South Africa. You may remember that they were banned from cricket as well. It's only after they dismantled the system of apartheid that South Africa was welcomed back into the global sporting fraternity. And their first cricket series after re-entering the global world order was against India. It was a 3 one-day match series against India, which India won 2-1, if I'm not mistaken. So India was the nation to welcome them back with open arms. So South Africa was banned for practicing apartheid. Well, Pakistan practices something much worse. Pakistan practices terrorism. I think Pakistan needs to be banned from any kind of sport. There should be a blanket ban on Pakistan They should not be allowed to participate in any international sporting activity. And India should ensure this happens. That's all I'll say. I'll not comment about the BCCI or any such thing, but that's what needs to happen. And the government of India and the BCCI have the power to compel all other cricket boards from not to not engage with Pakistan in any bilateral cricket engagements. And we can ensure that Pakistan is removed from multilateral tournaments as well. That's actually what needs to happen. That's what I would say. Nachiket Jayaraman says, what's the deep state's end game with DJT Donald J. Trump? 3.5 more years. Well, Donald J. Trump is obviously uh, tasked with reshaping the world order, the world economic order, and the global order is overall. So the US once constructed something that they have until recently been calling the rules-based world order, the Western-led liberal world order, the rules-based world order, right? Well, I've always said this even before Donald Trump came back for the second term, that the rules-based world order is a whims-based world order. They make up the rules as they go along, and whenever they feel like, they'll change the rules. Well, that's what's happening now. Donald J. Trump, his task over the next 3.5 years during his 4-year term is to completely reshape the global order, the trading order, the financial economic order, and overall the relationships between the US and all other nations. That's what the objective is. So the US is going to be much more harsh now towards other nations. It's going to treat allies also with this bullying behavior, arm twisting behavior. It's going to extract way more from allies. Um, and it's a world order that we are witnessing the bifurcation of. So it's all to do with the economic rise of China and technological rise of China, and the US obviously sees that as a very worrying development. And also India is also showing signs of, if India is left alone for the long term, India will also become a major economy. So the objective is to completely reshape the world order. So that's what DGT is doing, and in the next 3.5 years, it's going to be a very different world. Okay, Kapai developer says, what's the path to generate divergent tech trees? The rest of the world seems to play catch up with the leader. Is this an inherent tribal trait? Look, when it comes to creating divergent tech trees, uh, look, the US is obviously the technological leader in the world. And it has created all the platforms and all the technologies that the world consumes, right? Uh, the products may be manufactured elsewhere, but the products are still American products. So all these technology platforms like YouTube, like Facebook, like Google, like ChatGPT, like OpenAI, like Anthropic, and whatever else you can think of, all of that is American. All of the major cell phone OSs, operating systems, it's either iOS or Android. If Android is a derivative of Linux, let's say, well, Linux was also developed in the West, which the US is the overlord of. So it's the Western thing, and the Chinese have tried their best to create their own uh, parallel technological ecosystem behind the Great Firewall. So they also have created operating systems for phones, Android style operating systems, maybe by forking Linux or whatever. And they are trying to create their own semiconductor thing and all that, the semiconductor development ecosystem, their own photolithography machines and whatnot. So the Chinese are trying to create their own independent thing, and they are succeeding rather well at that. But when it comes to the rest of the world, like you're saying, like India, etc., we just following the leader. Following the leader, being a consumer rather than a producer. And when it comes to India, when we are saying that we are developing technologies, we are essentially, like you say, playing catch up. So we are trying to develop jet engines, the kind of jet engines that were developed 40 years ago, 30 years ago in the West. We are trying to develop fighter planes, the kind of fighter planes were developed a long time ago in the West, and so on. So it's to some extent because of passivity, to some extent because of an inferiority complex, and so on. So what's the path? Forget about the rest of the world, let's talk about India. What's the path? We need to have our own indigenous technological ecosystem. We need to have our own, Silicon Valley kinds of places where you can attract the best talent, not overtax them, not overwork them, not over regulate them. Let them do stuff, let them break stuff, let them create, let them try, let them fail, let some of them succeed. um, Incentivize them for succeeding, incentivize them for trying, don't penalize them for failing. And not just software but also hardware, all of this needs to happen. And it's I think it's the government's job and task to make this happen, I would say. Yeah. Okay, Joshua Lawrence says the US has deployed 2 nuclear submarines near Russian waters. If Russia's submarine fleet hypothetic is Russia's submarine fleet hypothetic Okay, if Russia's submarine fleet hypothetically surrounds the US submarines, how does this play out? Okay, look, Mr. Trump, he announced a couple of days ago, or maybe yesterday, maybe day before yesterday, whenever he did, he announced that first of all, he objected to the Russian politician Mr. Dmitry Medvedev's recent pronouncements on social media. He said that Mr. Medvedev is playing a very dangerous game, and you better be careful and that sort of thing. Issuing threats. Mr. Medvedev is a former Russian president. And then Mr. Trump said that since Mr. Medvedev is threatening nuclear war or whatever, so that's why I have taken the decision to deploy 2 of my nuclear assets, nuclear submarines, to the appropriate places, wherever it is. So people are construing that to mean that the US is deploying 2 nuclear submarines near Russian waters. Well, my dear friends, let me tell you something. Let me break some news to you. US submarines are always deployed in forward locations, always deployed in regions that are not far from Russian waters. Always. US nuclear submarines are always on patrol across the world in the various oceans, in the Pacific Ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean, in the Indian Ocean, the South China Sea, most likely, the Sea of Okhotsk. I don't know about that, but it's all over the place. And nuclear submarines, especially advanced ones like what the Americans have, they have very long endurance. What does endurance mean? It means the time they can spend at sea without needing resupplying or refueling. So they first of all they use nuclear reactors for their propulsion, right? Nuclear propulsion, which means that they essentially have unlimited legs, long legs, because they don't need to be refueled. I mean, the refueling is done once in a few years. So the nuclear reactor has sufficient fuel to last several years, actually. And they can recycle the air, which means the carbon dioxide that is exhaled by humans is recycled into oxygen. They have mechanisms for that. And they can carry enough food supplies to last, let's say, 6 months. So they are on mission for sometimes 6 months at a time. So they can go all across the world. And these nuclear submarines are an integral part of America's second strike capability. What do we mean by the second strike capability? In case an adversary is able to launch nuclear strikes in the US and destroy the US's ability to launch retaliatory strikes, then the nuclear submarines will do the job. And one nuclear submarine typically has enough ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads to destroy an entire continent. So that's the deal. So these nuclear submarines are always deployed all across the world. So this is, I mean, so then what does it mean that he is saying that? What is he trying to say? He's just expressing displeasure. There's always a cat and mouse game going on between the submarines of the various major powers. Okay, Russia also has a very powerful nuclear submarine fleet. And there are various kinds of nuclear submarines. Some are ballistic missile submarines. Some are attack submarines, hunter-killer submarines, and so on. So typically when a ballistic missile submarine is on a long-range patrol, you're going to have some other nations' submarines trailing it, trying to detect and trying to see where it's going. It's always a cat and mouse game. It's always going on right now as we speak. Right now as we speak. It's happening. It's happening in the Indian Ocean as well. We also have our nuclear submarines on patrol right now. And that's how it goes. So that's how it plays out. It's an ongoing cat and mouse game. Right now, as we speak, there are submarines dozens of submarines on patrol, on duty. Saurabh Gaikwad, thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir. Ishan Mukherjee says, if the US hadn't got its independence from the UK, how would the British Empire? No, would the British Empire have created nukes and become a mega superpower, even with colonies till date? Okay, so if the US had not received its independence, from the UK, even then the world would be run by the same empire that we have today, but it would be perhaps headquartered in London. Or maybe the British Empire would have decided that we have this huge continent that we own, that we have captured by genociding the natives, so by stealing the land. Let's move our capital to North America, and they may have possibly created a capital city somewhere in North America, and eventually they may also have created nukes, depending on the threat perception and so on. So we have to understand that the US empire is nothing but a continuation of the British Empire. And if the US empire had not been created, it would have been the British Empire that would have been ruling the world right now. Maybe from London, maybe from somewhere in the continent of North America. Now, the question you have to ask yourself is, why did the US, first of all, how were the first nuclear weapons created? Well, all of that happened because of the discovery of quantum mechanics in the early 1900s. And then once you start understanding quantum mechanics and you start probing the atomic structure of various elements, and when you move up the chain and you come to the heavier elements and you discover the properties of uranium and the unstable nature and what a slow moving neutron can do if it hits a uranium nucleus, and then you see that a chain reaction is possible, then naturally you will want to weaponize it. So even if the British Empire had persisted and no American empire had been created, as long as quantum mechanics was discovered in the early 1900s, somebody would have come up with nuclear weapons. And most likely it would have been the UK. And of course, the Manhattan Project happened during the Second World War, when the US wanted this tremendous asymmetric advantage that nobody else would have. And that's why they did that on a war footing. And it was Dr. J. Robert Oppenheimer who was at the helm of the project. So, yeah, I think it would have happened anyway. Prashant says, aren't Indian drug manufacturers immune to tariffs? I am not sure if Trump's tariffs exclude Indian drug manufacturers. It is indeed true that India supplies about 40% of the generic drugs that the US as a nation, let's say, consumes. So, yeah, 40% of America's generic drugs are supplied from India. I'm not sure if Trump has imposed tariffs on India's drug manufacturers. They do need that. So let's say hypothetically, India stops tomorrow the export of these drugs to the US. It will create an immediate healthcare crisis in the US. Immediate. And America's public will blame whom? They will blame Donald J. Trump for that. He'll try and portray India as the bad guy, but we'll make it very clear that we are doing this in response to whatever tariffs, punitive tariffs, etc., Trump has imposed on us. It's you who started this. We are simply responding because there has to be some reciprocity. You take action, I'll take action. It's not good for the US if that happens, right? So that's one example of the kind of leverage that India does have. Obviously, the US has way more leverage than India, but we also have some leverage, and generic drugs are one of those factors that we have. So I'm not sure if Trump has imposed tariffs. Let's try and find out. Let's try and find out if he has. I think he's imposed blanket tariffs, right? I think he has imposed blanket tariffs on almost everything. Has he exempted certain products from the tariffs? I'm not sure. I'll not go and do the research now because we're doing a live stream, but check it out, guys. Ladies and gents, please check it out. Nirbhai says, recently The US has struck a one sided deal with the EU and Japan, even Indonesia, by the way, were pretty one sided. Why do people in these countries not realize that they have been vassalized? They were always vassals. They were always vassals. And okay, let's not talk about Japan for now. Briefly, let's talk about the EU only. The EU, the European Union. What is the European Union? It's a conglomeration of nations, all vassalized by the US. When did the vassalization happen? It essentially happened in 1945, when the entire continent of Europe was in ruins, and only two powers existed in Europe. One was the US, the other was the USSR. So, so that's what drew the Iron Curtain. And the eastern side of Europe was taken over by the USSR. The Warsaw Pact nations became the USSR's vassals, and the Western nations in Europe became American vassals. And it's been such a long standing situation that nobody realizes that we are vassals. But the leaders of the nations know that. And certain nations chafe against that. Certain nations have most other nations have simply accepted that as a fait accompli. This is just the way the world is. Okay? So the nation that chafes against American vassalhood is France. The other nations have simply accepted that it's the way things are. And when it comes to Japan, well, Japan is not just vassalized, it is under active permanent US military occupation. More than 130 permanent US military bases on Japanese soil. And what the Japanese people are taught in their education system, in school, college, university, etc., is that Japan has been a very evil country. We did very, very evil things. And whatever happened to us as a consequence was fully deserved by us. It was karma. So if the Americans tested two nuclear weapons on our cities, we deserved it. If the US enslaved us, we deserve it. If the US run our country today behind the scenes, we deserve it. And going forward, we have to be a pacifistic nation. We must not have an army. And we must do whatever the US tells us because they are better than us and they're superior to us. So that's sort of thing. And the Japanese constitution was written by Americans. So once you have the system, how will people ever realize that they are vassalized? So that's how it goes, you see. Saurabh Gaikwad says, your view on on the US importing uranium from Russia, is that hypocrisy? No, that's how the world works. And if you are being hypocritical, it means you've earned the right to be hypocritical. Only the powerful can be hypocritical. You see, that's how it goes. Preach one thing and do the other. Do something else. Do the opposite of that. So the US imports uranium from Russia, sure. Why does Russia sell it? Because it's making money out of it. It has sufficient reserves, excess reserves possibly. It's not just uranium that the US imports from Russia. Let me show you another example. I forget the name, but I'll Google it immediately. Okay. Rocket engines imported by USA from Russia. RD-180. RD-180. Okay. So the RD-180, what is this? First flight, etc. A rocket engine that was designed and built in Russia. It was developed for use on the US Atlas 3 and Atlas 5 launch vehicles. It is currently being phased out due to the national security implications of reliance on the Russian-built engine. The Americans have tried their best to reverse engineer this engine. And they have tried their best and they keep on failing. So the Americans still import this engine from Russia. So it's not just uranium, it's so much more. Check it out. Okay. So much more. Okay, Sandesh says, India's stand in trade tensions shows our deep strategic roots like Pulakeshi, who stopped Harshavardhan. India asserts autonomy, not bends to global powers, even if it's smaller and proud of roots and bold future. I'm not sure what's the connection between Pulkeshi, Harshvardhan, and trade tensions. You see, you have to please understand, my friends, that the modern day nation of India has tried its best to cut its ties from the civilizational entity that was Bharat, that was India. The constitution does say India, that is Bharat, and so on, but our constitution is entirely Western in nation. It is entirely non-Indian in nation. Our laws are entirely non-Indian in nature, and everything about the bureaucracy, the Indian economy, the government, not the economy, the government, governance machine, etc., is non-Indian actually. We have tried our best to ape the West. We've tried our best to erase our civilization. The education system has been a big factor in that, and so on. So if we are standing up to the bullies today, and if we are standing up for ourselves, it's a good thing. But it would be great if we would harken back even more to our ancient roots. But it's a good thing. I'm obviously I'm not complaining that we are standing up to the West. It's a very good thing. Ankita says, what do the West, which is the NATO alliance, want to achieve out of the Russia-Ukraine war, beside economic benefits from arms deal and weakening the Russian economy? Will this war ever end? Is it ever going to end? So, what does the West want to achieve is the question. So it was clear as soon as the USSR broke up that the US was not interested in disbanding or dissolving NATO. NATO was created as a response to what the US called the Soviet threat, the communist threat. But now the USSR was gone and Russia became a normal democratic nation. They even adopted democracy, Western style democracy. And they allowed the West to penetrate their markets and take over industries. And yet the US did not dissolve NATO. And they had made a promise to the Russians that they would not have NATO expand 1 inch eastwards, but they immediately broke the promise in a couple of years and they started expanding eastwards, eastwards, eastwards. And it became clear that Ukraine was Russia's red line. And the US carried out a coup in Ukraine, the so-called Euromaidan revolution, which was a coup. It was a regime change operation. It brought in a puppet regime, a US-backed regime in Ukraine. And eventually it led to the Crimean situation. Russia reabsorbed Crimea. And then you've had the Ukraine war, which has been raging since 2022. What's the objective of the West? The objective of the West is to weaken Russia. It's to weaken Russia's economy, what they call Russia's war economy. And they are willing to use the people of Ukraine as cannon fodder in their quest to weaken Russia. Well, from their perspective, unfortunately, it's not happened because Russia has actually become stronger as a consequence. They have reignited their war machinery, their military industrial ecosystem, and their economy has become stronger as a consequence. Their GDP has grown, and their their military budget has risen way beyond India's, and so on. So the objective was to drag Russia down, to bog Russia down, to degrade Russia's economy, to weaken Russia, and if possible, effect a regime change in Moscow, because Mr. Putin is a very bad man, right? So these are the objectives. But it's not happened. And now what's the objective? Just to keep the war dragging on as long as possible, to keep Russia bogged down in Ukraine so that it doesn't become a factor in the West's competition with China. That's the objective. So the Ukraine war, it looks like it's going to go on for, I hope not a decade. It looks like it's going to go on for several more years. Why do I say this? Because they are resupplying Ukraine. They are sending more aid to Ukraine, the Western nations, including European nations. They're supplying Ukraine with more money. They're supplying Ukraine with long-range strike weapons. And because of that, the Ukraine government carried out long-range strikes on Russia. They struck at Russian air bases deep inside Russian territory. They conducted Operation Spiderweb. It was called Operation Spiderweb, and so much more. So this is causing an escalation of the war, and so on. So it looks like the war will go on for a long time. And yeah, but the West hasn't achieved its objective of weakening and degrading Russia's economy. And the great dream was to carry out a regime change in Moscow, not directly, but maybe indirectly. So if the war is not going well, if Russia's economy is dragged down, if people are facing hardships and so on, then obviously there could be the temptation in Russia for the people to perhaps carry out a revolution kind of thing and change the government in the Kremlin. That obviously has not materialized. Satellite says, If the American deep state exists, so can we say that their democracy is fake? And what about India? How is India's democracy different from other democracies? Okay, let's do some kind of comparative analysis. Forget about the deep state right now. Forget about the deep state, whether it exists or not. Let's examine America's democracy structurally. When you have an election for the president, okay, we're talking about the topmost level. We'll not go all the way down to other levels. Presidential level democracy. So when American citizens are voting for the president, they are voting for two candidates. And one is from party A, the other is from party B, Republicans and Democrats. There's only two parties that matter in the US. They have some other political parties for namesake, but those are insignificant and immaterial. They don't matter. For all intents and purposes, the US is a two-party system. Two-party system, two-party state. And both parties have essentially the same foreign policy. They have different opinions and different policies and different agendas when it comes to domestic politics. But when it comes to external affairs, they have essentially the same agenda. And they follow the same rule books. So it's essentially a uniparty system masquerading as a two-party system. And even if we say it's a two-party system, that's just one step above a one-party system like China or North Korea, right? I mean, why isn't there a political party that represents the interests of the African American people? Why isn't there a political party that represents the interests of the Hispanic people? Why isn't there a political party that represents the interests of the native original inhabitants of the country? Why aren't there multiple political parties in each state in the US like we have in India? It's not a real democracy. It's an autocracy masquerading as a democracy. That's what the US is. It's a police state. Go to the US, go to New York City, see how many cops there are on the streets. You take those cops away for 15 minutes, there'll be riots. Okay? That's how it is. It's a police state. Even Europe is a police state. I'm talking about Western Europe. It's a police state. I recently, a few months ago, met some EU parliamentary delegations and some people from, and some of them did agree privately that Europe is a police state privately. They won't say it in open. So that's how it is. So do you call that democracy? Do you really call that a democracy? What you have in the US? Just two parties and both of them essentially have the same foreign policy. It's not really a democracy. What's the options that the people of the US have when it comes to voting? A or B? And both are essentially the same. In the US also, you have this political dynasty. The Clintons, the Bushes. Come on. What about India? Well, in India, you have got chaos. So many political parties. There's one political party that represents, there are multiple political parties that represent the interests of each little community or so-called caste or religion. Each state has multiple political parties. My goodness. You have a couple of political parties that are considered to be national parties, and there are so many other political parties all over the place. It's chaotic, it's a mess, but it's real democracy. And is it good for the country? That's a different story, right? So India is a genuine democracy, a vibrant democracy, a messy democracy. Yep. So that's how India's democracy is different. In other countries like France, the UK, etc., you have multiple parties, more than two. But even there, it's quite managed. In India, it's not managed. It's anybody can start a political party tomorrow, and if you have the money, you can do that. So so we don't even have to discuss the deep state in this context. Okay. Kumar Kanishk says, as the US is now gearing against India openly for sanctions, well, they're calling it tariffs for now. So for tariffs, will it hamper? Excuse me. So will it hamper India's defense procurement like Su-57, S-500, all of which are essential for defense? Look, the Americans are expressing tremendous displeasure over the fact that India is buying Russian oil and other connections with Russia and so on. So they want India to cut all ties with Russia. Otherwise, there's the threat of potentially 500% tariffs. So the US is being very tough with India. The Trump administration is being very tough with India right now. They are adopting a variety of maximalist stances in the diplomatic negotiations for a so-called trade deal, right? And obviously, what they want is India should become a US vassal, which means cut all ties with Russia, stop purchasing Russian oil, stop purchasing Russian weapons, only purchase American weapons, purchase oil from America, and do everything the Americans say. Be a good boy, little doggy, good dog. That's what they want. India will not do that, no matter what happens. So it's going to be it's going to be tough days for India because the Americans are obviously way more powerful. Will this hamper India's defense procurement? Look, we have now said it very clear to the US. We are not going to purchase your goddamned F-35s. Those what? Flying trash cans. We will not purchase those aircraft. But we need something as a stopgap measure until we have the AMCA becoming a viable, entering serial production, which will be maybe around 2030 something. By 2035, we should have reasonable numbers of that, hopefully. So we have a decade to go. In the interim, we need some stopgap arrangement. We need some decent numbers of fifth generation fighter planes. So that would most likely with the Su-57. Otherwise, we can buy a bunch of Rafales, maybe 100 plus Rafales, which also could perhaps make sense. But I would say we should go for the Su-57. It will really infuriate Donald Trump and the Americans, but we need the aircraft and we can't go for the F-35 for a variety of reasons beyond the trade thing and all that. So it would have to be the Su-57. It's going to be a very tough choice for India, a very hard decision to make, but India will need to make that decision. Otherwise, we have this tremendous shortfall of aircraft squadrons. The Pakistanis have nearly as many squadrons as India. India is economically like not anywhere near Pakistan. We are a much more gigantic economy, but we still have almost the same number of aircraft squadrons as Pakistan. This is unbelievable, and something needs to be done about that immediately. So India needs to quickly acquire a significant number of fighter planes, right? And there's news about the Chinese potentially supplying Pakistan with fighter planes and whatnot, fifth generation fighter planes, which will make the situation even more dire for India. And the US is very happy about that. They are okay with Pakistan being, like I said, in bed with China. So India will have to procure quickly fighter planes. We cannot dilly-dally for another couple of years. The decision will have to be made very soon. So will Trump's actions, the Trump regime's actions, hamper India's defense procurement? I hope not. It should not. Otherwise, we are sitting ducks to our enemies. Also, the S-500. I'm not sure if India is considering the S-500. India is developing its own S-400, S-500 kind of system, which is good. But if we have a shortfall, if we have a requirement in the interim time period, maybe we should even go for the S-500. The S-500 will be clearly an improvement over the already excellent S-400. So I think it makes sense. If we have that requirement of that sort of system, more numbers, maybe we can go for the S-500. Look, if it displeases the US, it is what it is. We've got to do what is in line with our national interest. And that's what the government has been saying the past few days, ever since Trump announced those tariffs, that India will do whatever it takes to safeguard India's national interest and the interests of India's citizens, which is good. Sachin Kumar says, how credible is mutually assured destruction? Mad. In an age of precision-guided conventional weapons, it is still very credible. Mutually assured destruction. What is this concept? It's a concept that emerged in the previous Cold War, the 20th century's Cold War. So the US had developed nuclear weapons. The USSR went ahead and quickly developed its own nuclear weapons. Then both nations started developing ballistic missiles, delivery systems. The Soviets, they had various options when it comes to delivering nuclear weapons to the destination: long range strategic bombers, also ballistic missiles. Both nations, the US and USSR, employed former Nazi rocket engineers, and that's how they developed their own space programs. And so the concept emerged that both nations can destroy the other. So, the logic, which essentially comes from game theory, was that uh, the presence of so many nuclear weapons ensured that both nations can't go to war. Because if one nuclear weapon is launched, then the receiving nation will immediately launch its own strike package before that nuclear weapon even lands, the missile even lands. And then if this nation launches a retaliatory strike package, then the other nation will again launch more missiles, and it's going to be a salvo from both sides, and both nations will end up being destroyed. So that's mutually assured destruction. So both nations ensured that they maintained stockpiles of up to 10,000 nuclear warheads each, which assured the other that if you attack me, I'm going to attack you, and we will both be destroyed. And then there was the concept of second strike and so on, which because of which you had nuclear submarines permanently on patrol, which would ensure that even if all the nuclear missiles on ground are destroyed, the submarines would ensure that the offensive country was destroyed. So that is mutually assured destruction, which essentially prevents war from happening. But it is so dangerous for the world. A false alarm or something can end up creating a cascade of events which will destroy the world. So that's mutually assured destruction. Does that concept still exist today? Absolutely. Absolutely. It still exists today. Even if you have precision guided conventional weapons, even then, the concept exists. India and China, let's take that example. Forget about the US and Russia today. India and China. It is said that India has about 180 nuclear warheads. That's what the West claims. Well, did they come and examine our warheads? I mean, what the hell? How do you know? But let's imagine we have 180 and the Chinese have what, 600, like the West says. You don't need 180 warheads to destroy a country. You don't need that. So in the context of India and China, India has extremely precise ballistic missiles and other kinds of missiles. We know that. We saw that during Operation Sindoor, the precision with which we hit our targets. The targets were just across the border, just Pakistan, just a couple of kilometers, 100 kilometers or something, 200, 300 kilometers away from where they were launched. But our missiles are extremely accurate even at longer distances. So we have very precise conventional weapons, precision guided conventional weapons. I expect the Chinese also have very precise precision guided conventional weapons, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, whatnot. Yeah. So let's say India and China hypothetically go to war. We never want it to happen, but hypothetically, and we use conventional weapons, very precise, and bam, 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 bam. So India strikes at China's assets in Tibet. Chinese occupied Tibet. China strikes at whatever assets they want to strike at, and we see how it goes. But let's say things go bad for either country, and then they think of using nuclear weapons. Then what happens? The other country also has nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them. Both countries have ballistic missiles with the whole other country in its complete range. Then both countries have MIRV equipped ballistic missiles, which is one missile containing multiple warheads, and the warheads can go in different directions and be targeted independently. So if a nuclear exchange happens, it will end up destroying both countries fully. Everything China or India has spent decades building up will be destroyed. So that is mutually assured destruction, and it exists. It is credible, and it is relevant even in this age of precision guided conventional weapons. All right. Rahul says, should we implement a law like GDPR, which with clauses that make it mandatory for companies to partner with local cloud partners, store data within India? I think it's a good idea. I don't know what GDPR is. Let me just quickly Google that. What is GDPR? Let me see. All right, GDPR. What is that? GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, a European Union law focused on data privacy and security. It sets guidelines on how organizations collect, process, and protect personal information of individuals within the EU. When enacted within the EU, long story. So I'll not go and read the whole thing, but if the law makes it mandatory for companies to partner with local cloud providers and store data within the host country, it makes a lot of sense. Yep. So depending on how things go with the US, we could and we should enact a law and implement it, like what you are mentioning here. Okay. Rahul says, please teach us systems thinking and design thinking. Is it, if possible, make a playlist just like Understanding America? It would help many young entrepreneurs. Okay, thank you for the suggestion. I will consider it seriously. Systems thinking and design thinking. Yeah, it's something that is very important. So I will take this into account. Thank you, sir. Raj Lalit says, big fan of your work, sir. Thank you for all the knowledge. Well, you're very welcome. It's my pleasure. And thank you so much, sir. Geopolitical Dubai says, why does Russia have only one aircraft carrier? Well, that's a good question. Why does Russia have only one aircraft carrier? First of all, we have to understand aircraft carriers aren't useful in contested waters. And it's a huge enticing target. So that's one thing. Russia is a continental empire. Let's Google. Let's not Google. Let's go to the map. Sorry. Let us go to map and let's take a look at Russia. So we're talking about Russia here, the country that sprawls across Eurasia. To the north of Russia, you have what looks like the ocean, but if we look at satellite images, you will see it's mostly ice. It's mostly ice. If we zoom in, okay, this is not satellite images. What is this? Terrain. I would like to say satellite. Okay, it's not doing a good job of showing us the satellite imagery, but if we zoom in, you will find that it is mostly ice. It's mostly ice and snow. It's all frozen. Novaya Zemlya, where they tested the Tsar Bomba back in the 1960s or something, 50 megaton. So Russia is a continental empire, continental entity, and its threat perception, its major threats lie on land. The major threats are west of Russia, which is the EU and NATO nations, and the other major threat for Russia is down south, which is China. And so Russia and other threats over here, obviously, are the hidden threats, which are submarines. So Russia doesn't have any hegemonic ambitions right now. Aircraft carriers are employed by hegemonic nations for the purpose of projecting power and terrorizing the nations that see the aircraft carriers. An aircraft carrier is a threat. It's a massive threat. But it's not something you employ in contested waters because it's so tempting to hit. I mean, the loss of an aircraft carrier is such a disaster for a nation's morale. So because of these reasons, and also perhaps because of budgetary constraints, etc., that's why Russia has only one aircraft carrier. It's not that important for Russia. Russia has tremendously dangerous submarines, and that's where the real threat for its adversaries lies. Anonymous scientist says Elon Musk compared the capabilities of different space agencies and the time their best vehicle would take to reach Mars. He intentionally excluded ISRO. Why does the West downplay India's achievements? Some sinister plan? There's no sinister plan. It's just the West doesn't like India. The West doesn't like India. There is a deep-rooted annoyance, let's say, with India. Why does India still exist? The West destroyed the entire world in the past 500 years. They destroyed entire civilizations, entire cultures. Look at Africa. Does any country in Africa practice its indigenous culture and independent system of governance anymore? Indigenous religions, nothing. Everything's been wiped out. There's just 2 foreign religions across Africa. This is a smattering of people here and there who practice some local African religions, and those people are demonized. They're called what? Practicing witchcraft or occult or ritualism or something, and those people are typically treated like criminals in Africa. So the West has destroyed entire cultures. They've enslaved entire nations. Look at Japan, enslaved. Look at South Korea, enslaved. Look at South Korea. Where's Buddhism today in South Korea? Almost wiped out. They have done that to everybody. They enslaved India for 2.5 centuries, and India is still not destroyed. That deeply annoys the West. And the West hates polytheism, despite them originally being a polytheistic culture, which was smashed out by Christianity over the past 1500 years or so. Polytheism was smashed out of the West brutally. So the West hates India for that. They hate polytheism. They don't understand polytheism. They consider it satanic and so on. And these Indians, these brown Indian Hindus who we ruled for 2.5 centuries, they dare stand up again on their own feet and they dare launch rockets into space. So there's this hatred, right? This deep, deep jealousy, annoyance, whatever. And that's why they like to exclude India. So yeah, sometimes and sometimes it is done without realizing what you're doing, but it's there deep down. Twinkle Barbados says, what's the long-term solution to the Bangladesh issue? The long-term solution to all issues in the subcontinent is for India to grow, India to rise, India to become so powerful that um, all the children of Mother India eventually want to return to the fold of Mother India. India has to become extremely powerful, economically and otherwise, technologically and culturally. In the matter of science, technology, in the matter of culture and civilization, economically also, India has to become a spacefaring power. India has to lead the world in everything. Once we start doing that, even if we are one third of the way there, all solutions or all problems will automatically start getting resolved. The long-term solution to all of India's problems is for India to rise again significantly, not be an also ran player. India should be the main player, not an NPC like this, right? India has historically, since 47, been an NPC. Now India is showing signs of aspiring to be a main player, a central character, and that's why. Yeah, okay, so that's what needs to happen. Vivek Singh says, can the US throw Taiwan as a carrot to China and engage them in a long war like Russia-Ukraine? Well, actually, the US won't mind that. The US won't mind China getting embroiled in a war in Taiwan. But then the question is, who does China fight for Taiwan? If it's Taiwan alone, then China can take care of Taiwan. But if the US supports Taiwan, and that's what causes the war to go on, well, that's a direct confrontation between China and the US, which is dangerous. So when it comes to Ukraine, it's all the supplies for Ukraine, etc., are coming in from the NATO nations, not directly from the US. It's coming via NATO. There is no NATO-like structure in the Taiwan region. You have South Korea, which is a US occupied country. You have Japan, but they don't want to get embroiled in any war. If the US wants, they can obviously embroil South Korea and Japan in a war about Taiwan. I mean, let me show the map. If you look at the map, see, we have Taiwan here. And you see the Japanese islands near Taiwan? See, Yonaguni. This is the island of Yonaguni, which is a Japanese island, right? Just about 100 or so, maybe 150 or so kilometers from Taiwan. Yeah, 113 kilometers from Taiwan. So Japan is right next to Taiwan. Let's say China makes a move on Taiwan. The question is, who defends Taiwan? The US has sufficient naval power to cause huge problems for China. But is it possible for the US to keep a war with China going on for a few years over Taiwan? I think it's pretty difficult. So Taiwan is a different situation. If you just look at the geography, you will realize that it's a different situation. Of course, the US could bring in South Korea and Japan into the mix, but it would not be good for South Korea or Japan. Those two nations could also end up getting significantly damaged as a consequence. Arent Indian says, have you watched Narasimha film Ball? Okay, we're not discussing movies today. We're discussing only geopolitics. Very sorry. I will only take geopolitics questions today. I apologize, but that's the rule, right? Look at the pinned comment. So maybe you can ask this question in a future live stream. All right, thank you. Khajuro Bitterthorn says, will India have more room to maneuver after the 2026 midterms in the US? Surely the Republicans will lose their majorities, or is trade policy all in the executive's hands? I think the trade policy is mostly in the executive's hands, and even if the Republicans lose their majority in the House or Senate or whatever, I think trade policy is still in the executive's hands. Of course, if the Republicans lose their majorities, it will make Donald Trump a rather diminished president, and his actions will then not be that popular. His image will have diminished, and obviously, it will make things kind of easier for India. Definitely, even if the trade policy remains in the executive's hands, but if the executive itself is weakened, the president himself is kind of weakened, and he loses some of his aura and strength and power, etc. in the US, then it will probably give India more room to maneuver. So yeah, we will have to wait and watch. I think we should wait until the 2026 midterms in the US. I think we should continue our trade negotiations with the US, which we are doing. We have been our government has been very mature. We haven't thrown a tantrum like Trump has thrown. We haven't backed down from the trade talks. We have said that we want to reach a mutually acceptable, beneficial trade deal with the US, and we are continuing our negotiations. So let us continue the negotiations and don't give in to the maximalist demands of the US, and keep it going as long as required. We cannot accede to all of their demands, and if that ensure that the trade negotiations go on for a long time, let it be so. It will obviously frustrate Trump. But yeah, what you're mentioning is very important. Things will most likely change after the 2026 midterms, and that will probably give India more room for maneuvering. Nilay Srivastav says, among the top four armies, except for China, all armies are battle hardened. Why PLA is not involved in any conflicts? China must be knowing the benefits of being involved in a conflict. Still, they boast that they can take Arunachal or beat the US. What you are saying makes significant sense. The last time the Chinese army, the so-called PLA, People's Liberation Army, the last time it was engaged in an actual conflict was 1979. Let's take a look. Here. So in the 1970s, Cambodia was taken over by the Khmer Rouge, which was a Chinese-backed leftist Maoist guerrilla outfit. They took over Cambodia and unleashed a horrific genocide on the people of Cambodia. Horrific. No words. That's how bad it was. So Vietnam, which was a communist nation, eventually, I think in 78 or 79, you can look it up, when they invaded Cambodia and liberated Cambodia from the Khmer Rouge. So they defeated a Chinese-backed terrorist organization, essentially, genocidal organization. And to punish Vietnam for defeating the Khmer Rouge, China invaded Vietnam from the north. The Chinese PLA invaded Vietnam. And they thought they will quickly overrun Vietnam and teach the Vietnamese a lesson. But what actually happened was unthinkable for China, because the Vietnamese gave the Chinese a resounding defeat. It was a humiliation for the PLA. So the PLA was defeated roundly and soundly by the Vietnamese, given an absolutely bloody nose in 1979. In 1987, there was a clash between India and China, I think in Arunachal Pradesh. And India won that clash. The Chinese were defeated in that as well. Since there was not a major conflict, obviously, it was a series of localized clashes. But since 1979, essentially, the Chinese PLA has not been involved in any conflict. They are not battle hardened. They are not battle tested at all. They don't even have any insurgencies or any such separatist movements or any such thing that they've been battling. So the question you're asking is, why doesn't the PLA get involved in any conflicts? Well, they don't want to. There are benefits of being involved in conflicts, because it battle tests you. It allows you to test your new weapons and see their strengths and weaknesses. It battle hardens your soldiers, all of that. But the question is, who does China fight with? It means they will have to initiate some conflict somewhere. Well, there are drawbacks to initiating conflicts, right? You may get beaten again. So that's the deal. So obviously they will boast. China is a nation that is great at propaganda. They will boast that they can beat everybody, take Arunachal, whatever. Well, please try it. Please do try if you want to. Yeah, so there you have it. Naiu2Ka says, why Russian invasion of Hostomel airport day one of war failed? What lessons can we learn if we need to do a similar air bridge operation in Skardu in the future? What is I'm not sure of this Hostomel thing. Let me check it out. Russian invasion of Hostomel airport. What is Hostomel airport? Hostomel Airport. What happened there? Battle of Hostomel Airport was a military engagement that happened at this airport during the Kiev offensive. Okay, in early 2024. Yeah, on 24 February, this special military operation started. And 25 February 2022, this thing happened. And what, Russia failed, did it, at this battle? What was the outcome? Result, occupation of this thing by Russia until 2nd April. And so on. Unexpected declare. Okay, so it looks like Russia tried to take this and they were foiled at that. So I haven't analyzed the battle. I don't know why it failed. So I'm not sure what lessons we can draw. I will have to read the whole thing, analyze it, and then draw conclusions from that. I haven't done that. And during a live stream, I will not waste your time by sitting 5 minutes and reading the whole thing. So I'm sorry I can't answer the question because I haven't studied this. All right. But what lessons can we learn if we need to do a similar air bridge operation in Skardu in the future? I would say, look, don't try to do air bridge operations at all. Conquer whatever you want to conquer and absorb whatever territory you want to absorb through movements on land. That's more sustainable. Yeah. Okay. Gaurav Rathi says, if Russia had not developed nukes, would the US have eventually vassalized Russia? Are Russian nukes the only reason why the world is not a US vassal? I think the only thing that prevents nations from becoming vassals of somebody else is the final weapon. How many nations have nukes? You have the US, you have Russia, which was formerly the USSR. You have France, we have the UK, that's 4. You have China, obviously. That's 5. Then you have Israel, India, Pakistan, North Korea. That's 8. What am I missing? I'm missing somebody. List of nuclear countries. North Korea. What? List of states with nuclear weapons. What did I miss? North Korea, Israel, Pakistan, India, China, France, UK. Yeah, okay. So these are the nations. It's 8 or 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 nations. All right, there we have it. So the US was the first nation to acquire nuclear weapons. That the USSR immediately, as soon as possible, acquired nuclear weapons because it was very important for them to do that. Then the Americans proliferated nuclear weapons to several countries. The UK and France. The US proliferated nuclear technology to the UK and France. Then China developed nuclear weapons, then India, and eventually other countries. The Israelis also probably benefited from American or from second order effects of US proliferation. So you see, France and the UK did acquire nukes in the 1950s and 1960s, but they are both American vassals. So they developed nuclear weapons for the benefit essentially of the US and to serve as a bulwark against the USSR, because the US wanted nuclear weapons in the continental part of Western Europe and offshore part of Western Europe as a bulwark against the USSR. So that's why they proliferated nuclear weapons to the UK first and then to France. And they were okay with Israel for some reason acquiring nukes, right? So sometimes the overlord will proliferate nuclear weapons to its vassals, but do so in a way that the nukes can never ever be used against itself. And sometimes the only option a nation has to avoid becoming a vassal is to acquire nukes. That's what Russia, the USSR did. That's what China did. That's what India has done. Pakistan most likely has American nuclear warheads on loan or whatever. And North Korea has been possibly allowed by China or possibly maybe China proliferated nuclear technology to North Korea. So it's pretty complex and complicated that way. Uh, so the question you're asking is Russian nukes the only reason why the whole world is not US vassal? To some extent, there is some truth to that. To some extent. Dheeraj Kamath says, why and how did the US impose 15% tariffs on Israel if the US is a vassal of Israel? I have never claimed that the US is a vassal of Israel. Let's see. US tariffs on Israel. Let's see. Tariffs. 15% on Israel. Let's see what it says. 2 percentage points lower than what Trump admitted. Going to effect in 7 days. Will use tariffs as necessary. Let's see. Trump 15% tariffs on Israeli goods. The rate set of Israel. The finance ministry responded that Israel at the lower end reflects positive dialogue. So yeah, the US is indeed imposing tariffs on Israel, and if you don't do that, then it looks like you are their vassal. So it's okay. How and why? Why and how? Well, how, we know how it happened. The Trump administration announced tariffs. So it's like this. Look, if you are imposing tariffs on the entire world, but you exclude one nation, it looks very bad. Yeah. So even if you have a special relationship with Israel, it makes sense to impose tariffs on Israel as well. I'm not sure if these are blanket tariffs or whatever. I don't think it'll hurt Israel too much. Israel is a pretty prosperous nation, very high GDP per capita and so on. It won't hurt Israel too much. So I have never claimed that the US is a vassal of Israel, by the way. Okay. So is it? Well, time will tell, perhaps. Who's vassal? Who's vassal? Time will tell, I suppose. Animesh Paul says the US spends billions on wars, yet its healthcare remains broken and expensive. Is this by design? Of course, it's by design. Of course, it's by design. Why not prioritize affordable healthcare or education? Do geopolitical interests outweigh citizens' well-being? The US is a capitalist nation. Capitalism is pretty rough on people who are not very capable, very good at earning money. The US is almost like a paradise for people who are wealthy. If you are wealthy in the US, which means if you have a net worth in excess of at least $5 million, it's a great country. It's fantastic. It's paradise for you. But if you are one of those people who earns, let's say, $50,000 a year, good God, it's hell. Some people earn $30,000 a year. If you are a low skilled person, if you don't have a great income, the US is terrible for you. And that's the system. That's the way that the system is by design. By design. The US can certainly afford to give free healthcare to everybody, but they don't. Everything is an industry. Healthcare is an industry. Agriculture is an industry. Everything is an industry, and the objective of the industry, the objective of the corporations, is to maximize profit at the expense of the people. It's by design. It's by design, and this has nothing to do with geopolitical interests. By the way, this is the way the US has been for over a century, since the beginning of the 20th century, more or less, roughly. It has nothing to do with geopolitics. That is just the DNA of the nation. That's how it is. Okay, Harmanjot Singh says, does anybody gonna reconcile the fact that the war started just because the US tried to add Ukraine to NATO? Russia even said that they will de-escalate on refusal. No, I think everybody knows that, but if you look at the Western commentary, they will blame Russia for starting the war. If you see Western analysts and commentators and what they say in their pronouncements, in their articles, in their social media posts, they will say it's Russia's war on Ukraine, Putin's war on Ukraine, Russia's war economy. They try to place the blame on Russia. But the fact is undeniable. That it's the West that caused this war. They kept on marching eastwards inexorably. They had given a promise to the Russians that they would not expand NATO further, but they kept on expanding NATO further and further eastwards. And Ukraine was the red line. Many American analysts had warned that Ukraine was a red line for Russia, and they had warned this more over a decade before the actual war happened. More than a decade before the war happened. So the Western analysts will try and sidestep this fact. But the fact is that the war started because of American actions. First of all, they conducted a regime change operation in Kiev, in Ukraine. In 2014, was it? Around 2014, the Euromaidan coup. I mean, Victoria Nuland was on the ground in Kiev when this happened, right? And they ousted a democratically, constitutionally elected government and replaced it with a puppet regime of the West. It all started there. As a consequence, Russia quickly reabsorbed Crimea, and that is called an act of aggression by the Americans, by the West. That's how it is. So it's very clear that the war happened because of Western actions. Russia was left with no choice but to start the war, but to conduct the so-called special military operation. WRV says China or the US, who is a bigger long-term threat for India? Well, look, neither are our friends, and both will continue to exist for a long time. So I think both see India as a problem. Both seek to clip India's wings and cut India down to size. Neither wants to see India become prosperous and strong again in the future. And both are willing to use Pakistan as a stick to beat India with. I think if you regard these two nations as threats, if you do, and you want to know which one is the longer term threat, the long term threat, I think both are equal in that sense. Both are equal in that sense. Mayank says that the Spanish, the Ottoman Empire, the Roman Empire, etc., used tariffs at the end. Tariffs, etc., that's been used in all economies historically. Tariffs, and there is something called mercantilism and so on. So yeah, you're right. ICBMs says you spoke about politicians being lazy about energy security vis-a-vis oil, for example. Could the same thing be said about nuclear energy given how well France has done? Oh, absolutely. And you can't blame the scientists and engineers and technicians who work in India's nuclear program for this. You can't blame them. See, let's take the example of France. France generates about 60 or 70% of France's electrical energy comes from its nuclear program, nuclear reactors. 60 to 70%, you can look it up. So France has been tremendously successful at using nuclear power for energy generation. The most successful country in the world. And that saves France so much money. So India also has this long-standing 3-stage nuclear program that was devised by Dr. Homi Bhabha back in the 20th century, middle 1960s or something. And we have been very lax in implementing this. We have tremendous thorium reserves in India. We have the world's largest thorium reserves. But we have not taken the steps to operationalize a full-fledged thorium nuclear power program. We're still dilly-dallying and taking like little steps in that direction. So yeah, you're absolutely right. We have our leaders, the leaders of the country have been tremendously lazy when it comes to taking the nuclear program forward. By now, we should have been the world's biggest generator of nuclear energy and electricity via thorium. But yeah, there we are. Unfortunate. Sumit says, is wokeness dying? Sydney Sweeney jeans commercial. This is not a geopolitical topic, sir. It's not, right? But yeah, it seems to be dying. All right. Dheeraj Kamath says, why is Donald Trump not releasing the Epstein files? Is it likely that he too is a disgusting predator? I haven't seen those files, so should I speculate? I don't know. So let's consider the options. the possibilities, the scenarios. One scenario is that, yeah, he may be on the Epstein files. He may be one of the people who is mentioned in the files. That's one possibility. Second possibility is that maybe he's not mentioned in the Epstein files, but very powerful, very important people in the US are mentioned in those files, and maybe they belong to both political parties, and it will be equally damaging to both political parties. That's another scenario. Number three scenario is that maybe very powerful people, world leaders from other countries are mentioned in the Epstein files. And if you release the files, then all of that leverage that you have, that the US has over those people, it evaporates, because now they're outed and there's no more blackmailing to be done, because now everyone knows. So there are multiple scenarios that could explain why Trump is not releasing the files. I remember his vice president, Mr. Vance, was saying that the files need to be released. I remember Kash Patel, the FBI director in the past, I think kind of mentioned that those files need to be released and so on. Trump also kind of must have said in the past. But now they're all claiming that the files don't exist at all. So clearly there is something at play over here. All right, Venkat Sai says, what's the origin of the Maori people, the indigenous people of New Zealand? Their facial features resemble Indians. Were their origins connected to India in any way? The Maori people, they arrived in New Zealand less than 1,000 years ago. They are, what's their ethnic group you're asking? They are Polynesian people, the Polynesian peoples. They are the inhabitants of the South Pacific Ocean. So let's go to the maps, to the map. We are familiar with this part of the world and that part of the world, but there's this huge domain that's like not uncharted, but it's like just ocean, the South Pacific. And over here you have all these little islands, island communities. You have Fiji, you have Tonga, you have the Cook Islands, you have French Polynesia, you have Tahiti, Tokelau, Kiribati, Nauru, Tuvalu, the Solomon Islands, New Caledonia, Vanuatu, the Marshall Islands, Micronesia, the Northern Mariana Islands, Palau. You have Hawaii. You have the Pitcairn Islands. You have Hangaroa, which obviously no one lives there anymore, and so on. So the people who live across all these islands, they are the Polynesian people. And the people of New Zealand, the Maoris, are ethnically part of that ethnic group, the Polynesian people, and they arrived in New Zealand less than 1,000 years ago. And there were the Moriori also over there. That's a whole different story, which we'll not delve into. And even the people of Papua New Guinea are part of the same overall ethnic group. Is there a connection with India? Not as far as I know. As far as I know, there is no connection that I know of with the people of India. There could be, but I don't know of any. All right. Arjun says, should India have bought the Saab Gripen with full technology transfer, as like they agreed with Thailand, as Dassault denied India Rafale's source code? Is there any guarantee they will give you full technology transfer? There's no guarantee. The Gripen is what? Swedish? Probably Swedish. They are a US asset. You think they will give us full technology transfer? Eventually, during the negotiations, some clauses will come up which will imply that there will be full technology transfer won't happen. So no. And again, I don't know how good or bad the aircraft is. Maybe it's a very good aircraft, whatever. But how many different kinds of aircraft do we want to have in the country? It's an absolute nightmare for procuring spare parts, for getting servicing done, for training pilots, for training technicians and engineers. It's a headache. It's an absolute nightmare when you have so many different kinds of aircraft. I don't know what they have agreed with Thailand. Thailand, if they are acquiring the aircraft with full technology transfer, well, good luck to them and congratulations. But I don't think they will do that for India, even if they may have offered it to us. Dassault denied Rafale source code. I don't know. Whatever. That's how it goes. Look, you have to develop your own aircraft, which you control entirely. You can buy a certain aircraft as a stopgap measure, but you can't buy like hundreds of different kinds of aircraft, a whole zoo of different kinds of aircraft. It becomes a nightmare. So I think it's a good idea, good thing that we did not buy the Gripen. I will not take political questions. I will take geopolitics questions. Right. Rahul says, even though it's many decades away, how would quantum computing and quantum AI reshape economy, warfare, humanity in general? I am not sure if it's several decades away. Quantum computing could become more prevalent in as much as a decade's time. Every country is doing is has a quantum computing. Every major country, every self-respecting country is taking quantum computing research very seriously. Even India has its own quantum computer now, at least one that I know of, probably more. uh, and there are issues and there are difficulties in quantum computing and all because of various factors. We'll not go into the physics of that, but I think within a decade's time quantum computing will be much more robust. And I think probably within 2 decades you may have commercially available quantum computers. 2 decades at most, in my opinion, in my assessment. um, so once you have quantum computing becoming significantly prevalent, it could reshape a lot of things. It could make cryptography, well, the present cryptographic templates, not templates, techniques, pretty obsolete, because cryptography is all about encrypting information, and quantum computing will break that for sure. Warfare, warfare as well, humanity in general. I think, look, quantum computing gives you more powerful computers. It allows computers to do things that conventional computers currently can't do. Very, very difficult problems can be solved easily using quantum computers because of the inherent nature of quantum superpositions and entanglements and all that. So essentially, what it means, forget about the scientific terms and all that, technical terms. Quantum computers, when they arrive, will be way more powerful than regular computers for a specific number of tasks. So that will allow us to do better jobs at drug discovery and uh, molecule discovery, probably solving diseases, curing diseases like cancer and so on. Warfare, obviously encryption will become more difficult. uh, Entanglement, so yeah, it will give you radars that can break stealth technology, that can detect stealth aircraft, and so much more. So overall, it just means that you have computers that are super powerful and which can do things that you can't currently do with normal computers. And when you take quantum computing and merge it with AI, it will be a whole different dimension. So yeah, obviously it's going to be very powerful. It's going to be transformative for the world as we know it. And I think overall, humanity is going to be it's going to be a whole different ride for humanity going forward, and it's starting right now actually. um Arun says, anyway, I can think of Pakistan and US finding oil is by occupying international waters in Arabian Sea. Is it possible? Am I overthinking? Do we have any known major oil discoveries in the so-called Arabian Sea, the Western Indian Ocean? I am not aware of any. If there is something, well, good for them. They can't occupy international waters. International waters, anybody can occupy that way. They can see Pakistan, if it wants to dig for oil and extract oil, it can only do that in its territorial waters or within its exclusive economic zone, not beyond that. If the US helps Pakistan in doing something like that, you're essentially breaking international law, right? That's not good. Of course, it's possible because the US can do anything it wants. It's the most powerful country in the world. It's certainly possible. So I would not say you're overthinking. It's definitely within the realm of possibility. But we'll see. Yeah. Aditya Bandari says, did Trump fail in destroying the drug cartels? Look, these drug cartels, where do they exist? Some exist in Mexico. Some exist in Colombia. The Colombian cartels are the classic famous ones, infamous ones, right? The notorious ones. The Cali cartel, the Sinaloa cartel, the Medellin cartel. Don Pablo Escobar was the boss of the Medellin cartel and so on. The question you have to ask yourselves is this. These cartels that produce drugs, who's their customer? Who's the consumer? What is the market, the target market? It's the US. It's the US. Now, you also have to ask yourselves, why is it so easy to acquire drugs in the US? Drugs are available everywhere in the US. Everybody does drugs at some point in their life. That's how the US is. If drugs are illegal, why are they so easy to obtain? Isn't the US the greatest nation in law enforcement? So why are they allowing drugs to be so easy to procure? It's for some reason they want their people to be hooked to drugs. It looks like. So why would they then destroy the cartels? They don't. They will not destroy the cartels. Yeah. Okay, Godliness says in the last 13 years, India has signed three important strategic pacts with the US: Lemoa, Gasomia, Komkasa. Will it cost us in the future? Also, some words on US defense policy for the Indian Ocean. Look, we have indeed signed these pacts, and these pacts, they allow some kind of US penetration of Indian defense systems to a certain extent. Certain extent. Not full, but to a certain extent. So we have indeed signed these pacts because we were trusting of the US. Will it cost us in the future? Look, all we have to do is to walk away from the pacts. It's not impossible. Hasn't the US walked away from the JCPOA with Iran, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iran nuclear deal? The US walked away unilaterally from that. The Chinese walked away unilaterally from their deal with the UK vis-a-vis Hong Kong, one nation, two systems. The Chinese walked away unilaterally. India walked away unilaterally from the Indus Waters Treaty. Similarly, if you have signed a pact with somebody, you can walk away from it. Of course, the US will not be pleased with such an action, but we can walk away if it is potentially going to be bad for our national interest. Yeah. It may cost us something. The US may take actions that are bad for us. They may throw more tantrums and so on. That could happen for sure. But it is what it is. So if it is in the national interest to walk away from the pact, we can do it. For that, we may have to stop using the US equipment we have bought. Of course, the walking away from the pacts may make that equipment unusable for us. But it is what it is. Maybe it's a price we may have to pay. Some words on US defense policy for the Indian Ocean. The US has assets in the Indian Ocean region. If you look at the map, see, if you look at the Indian Ocean, the major power is obviously India. We also have France, which is a significant power in India. The French have certain assets in the Indian Ocean region, like Réunion and certain other islands. Where are those islands? French southern Antarctic lands, and so on. Alfred de Fort, I'm not sure if it's French or not. Is it French? Île de la Position, Île de l'Est. Yeah, I think it's French. Île Creuset, Île aux Cochons, which means the island of the pigs, island with pigs or whatever, and so on. So the French have some assets in the Indian Ocean region, and that's why they have a presence here. And France and India are are essentially cooperating when it comes to Indian Ocean security. When it comes to the US presence in the Indian Ocean region, they have lots of air bases and naval bases in the Gulf region. They have something in Djibouti. They obviously have a power projection center in south of the Maldives, which is Diego Garcia, from which they can launch strategic bombers to bomb any country they want in the region, and so on. And they obviously have Australia, which is a US asset. So the Indian Ocean region for the US is not that important because they don't have any major threats or enemies in the region. As India grows and becomes more powerful, they may choose to focus more on the Indian Ocean region in the future. We'll see about that. Okay. Rahul says, how could techno-capitalism and geopolitics evolve in the coming years? Can China catch up with a silicon and high NA alternative ASML competitor? Can China catch up? How will all of this evolve? Look, technology is an integral component of geopolitics. The nations that rule the world are generally the nations that are the most technologically advanced. That's something you've seen throughout history, right? And that's why what you will see is that the current geopolitical race in the world, the competition that we are seeing, the geopolitical competition between the US and China, is also a technological competition. It's a technological arms race that we are seeing right now. And it is the technological arms race that is driving the geopolitical race and the trade and tariffs race also. That war that's happening right now, that also. So there's a significant technological undercurrent to everything. Technology, to some extent, is a driver of what's happening. So why has the US now decided to go all in against China? It all started with Trump Around 2019 or so, when he imposed certain restrictions on exports, American exports to China, the CHIPS Act or whatever it was, Biden continued that. So why did they choose to do this around 2019? Until that time, the US was the biggest trade partner of China, right? But around 2019, they started imposing these restrictions on China because they realized that China is beginning to catch up with the US technologically in a very dangerous way. So that's why this is going on. Now, the Chinese, they are now facing all these, you could almost call them sanctions, right? Sanctions, technological sanctions, and technology denial from the US. Nvidia is not allowed to sell certain chips to China and so on. So the Chinese are trying to create their own technology, their own ASML alternative. They're trying to create their own photolithographic technology that will enable them to manufacture their own high-end chips, GPUs, and whatnot. They are trying to do that, and they are not doing a bad job of it. Okay, so it's quite likely. See, the Chinese, what they've done is they invested trillions of dollars in two things since the 1990s. They invested trillions of dollars very systematically on two things. First, their education system, and second, their technological ecosystem. And the education system is what feeds the technological ecosystem, because they focus their education system on science and technology. They made it a point to ensure that their universities become some of the best universities in the world. Research driven universities. They hunted down and attracted the best talent, teaching talent, to China's universities. They reformed the education system thoroughly. So now the education system produces high quality engineers and technicians and scientists, and those then go and fit into the technological ecosystem that China has. So they identify the core technology, the critical technologies that China needs to master around 2000, around the year 2000, and they brought in foreign experts to help them. So it's been a very systematic step by step process that they've taken, and they've invested trillions of dollars worth of wealth into that. And that's why they're in a position where they can actually compete with the US. So it's a technological arms race that's going to be neck and neck essentially over the coming years. The advantage the US has is that they've got a big head start. They've got the Silicon Valley thing and all. The Chinese are now developing their own, parallel systems. They're competitors, and they're doing a very good job. The real advantage of the US is its global power projection capabilities, and China is betting that their technological advances will help them overcome the US advantages, and that's what's going on. So it's going to be a neck and neck race in the coming years. Arun says Australia's first rocket launch failed. I was surprised that they could not do it. And the Western media sphere looks down upon India whenever we launch something. Well, that's how it goes. Like I said, the West is deeply unhappy that India even exists. They would have wanted us to have been totally destroyed by the British during the 2.5 centuries of occupation. And the fact that we are still polytheists majorly is a huge irritant for the West. So if something goes wrong in India, they will highlight it for weeks. If something goes wrong in a Western nation, well, they'll just keep quiet about that. That's how it goes. Anonymous scientist says, what should India do if China invades Taiwan? First of all, India should stay out of the matter. But if required, India should take steps to secure nations in our periphery. Secure, I don't mean invade. Secure. Essentially Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, etc. Whatever steps need to be taken. Kaushal says, how does the long-term future 100 years for India look like? I'm both afraid and hopeful at the same time. What's your 100-year outlook for India? Look, if I am to be optimistic, in 100 years, you will have Indian citizens living on various cities on Mars, in 100 years. If I'm to be optimistic, India will be the major power in the world, the most advanced technological power, and obviously economic and geopolitical power. If Indians are living on Mars, it means that we have essentially reached the stars, the stepping stone to the stars. That is if everything goes well. For that to happen, the next 20 years is the most crucial, right? The worst thing that you can imagine is that India gets balkanized and it's over for India. That's also a possibility, but I am by nature an optimistic person. So I think I am confident, I'm optimistic that India will be able to overcome all the challenges and difficulties. India will be able to withstand everything that the West and in the rest of the world throws at us over the next 20 years. India will be able to overcome all of that. India will be able to grow and rise again. India will be able to return to its indigenous cultural and civilizational roots and throw away the vestiges of colonialism that we are laboring under right now. And I'm optimistic that great leaders will emerge in India. And I think in 100 years, Indians will be living in cities on Mars, and India will have conquered space. And India will be the most advanced and prosperous nation, civilization on the planet. MK says, could Kamala have been better for India? Well, maybe. If you look at the way things are going, maybe you could say Biden and Kamala would have been better for India. Okay. Rational reporter says, if the parliament makes a law giving the prime minister option to use military like we did in Sri Lanka and Maldives to stop a coup in our neighborhood if that country requests, could that help prevent future Bangladesh like situations? The Parliament of India does not need to enact a law giving the prime minister that option. The prime minister already has the option. The prime minister of India must do whatever it takes to safeguard and promote India's interests wherever required. I don't think Parliament needs to enact a law for that to happen. Yeah. So if there's a coup in the neighborhood that's going to happen or about to happen or happening, that will be bad for India. I think the Prime Minister of India has the option to intervene if required. And that obviously could help us prevent future Bangladesh-like situations. Parth Sane says, which countries are likely to succeed at quantum computing? Definitely the US, definitely China. India also could be on the way. European nations like France possibly could do that. Russia could possibly do that. Who else can I see? Maybe Israel. Japan, obviously. Japan, maybe even South Korea. So all the nations that are technologically advanced have high quality technological ecosystems, etc. Will do that. I think India also will do pretty well. We are on the way to that. Yeah. Okay. Vamshi Kalem says, what GDP can we unilaterally take action at? 10, 15 or 20? Right now, we're closing in on 5 trillion. Right now, we can't unilaterally take action like what the US can do. China is at $18 trillion. Even China today cannot unilaterally take action like invading Taiwan. So I think we will have to bide our time, maybe until 20. Okay, let's say until 20. Give it 20 years. Work as hard as possible, all of us. In 20 years, if we are at $20 trillion, maybe we will be able to take unilateral action, yes? Okay. Pratham Soni says, in the Galwan clash, what Modi government action was different from past governments? What changed? China, POV versus India? What led to 5-year standoff and some tips to raise standards? What? Ask one question. Excuse me. Let's take one question at a time. Galwan clash. The first armed clash between the two nations for, I don't know, since the 1980s or something. Maybe even before that. The first time bullets were fired in multiple decades. The first deaths for since I think the 1960s, deaths of soldiers on both sides. So why did the clash happen? It's because the Chinese were getting very upset and anxious about the infrastructure development on the Indian side of the line of actual control. For decades, Indian governments had not bothered to develop any infrastructure on the Indian side. So what action did the Modi government take, first of all, that caused this from China's perspective, from China's side? It is the Modi government doubling down on creating as much infrastructure as possible, as rapidly as possible. You go to the border regions, you will see BRO, Border Roads Organization, working day and night, whatever weather it is, whether it is raining, whether it is snowing, whether there's a hailstorm, they are always working. We are building infrastructure it as fast as is humanly possible. We are building roads, we are building whatever is required. And the Chinese were very upset about this. And they were trying to push, and that's why the clash happened. And after the clash happened, the government of India, the Modi government, like you said, did not back down. We had a standoff with China for several years, face to face. In the past, the Indian government would have backed down from that. So a lot changed. A lot has changed now. This is the different India, obviously, right? Uday Kumar says, can the US freeze India's forex reserves like Russia? Do we have assets that the US that are based in the US? If we have assets that are based in the US can obviously freeze those. Yeah. So it's best not to do that. Arun says, as a backpacker, I have noticed Western tourists come to India to see the spiritual side of India. They want to do yoga, etc. Eastern tourists like to experience food of various regions. We should be using food software the way we use yoga. I could not agree more with you. I completely agree with you. We have such a tremendous diversity of cuisines in this country, in India. Every state has multiple cuisines in the various local regions. Every 50 kilometers is a new cuisine. We should start culinary schools in each state. Every state should have multiple culinary institutes where you are taught cuisine and it's presented and served at the highest standards. Why can't we do that? We have the best cuisines in the world, but we don't serve them properly. We don't showcase them properly. It's all about presentation. It's all about style. It's all about the way you put it across. India has the potential to be the world's premier tourism destination, to be a tourism superpower. It's a low hanging fruit. We are doing nothing about it. It's such a shame. So, Arun, I completely agree with you. Completely. Siddhant Verma says, could Iranian Azerbaijan and Khuzestan break away from Iran due to separatist movements? How come half of Iranians identify as non-Persian, like Gilakis, Azeris, Arabs, etc.? Because they are not Persian. Why do half of Iranians identify as non-Persian? Because ethnically they are not Persian. Ethnically they are Azeris. Ethnically they are Arabs. Ethnically they are Baluchis. Ethnically they are whatever else. How did that happen? Well, Iran, like India, was for quite some time under Turkic occupation. Let's say part of the Khwarezm Empire. Then the Khwarezm Empire was destroyed by Shri Chinggis Khan. Then you had other Turkic empires. That evil, what's the monster? Let's call him monster. That evil monster Nadir Shah, who sacked Delhi and genocided the people of Delhi. He was a Turk. He was not Persian. So when the Turks were ruling Persia, they brought in lots of people from other parts of their empire, out non-Persian parts of the empire, and had them settled in Persia. If you look at the people of Iran today, many of them actually look white. There are people with blonde hair, people with blue eyes or green eyes or whatever. There are many people in Iran who look almost European, right? Those are the non-Persian people. Those are the non-Persian people. So it's the Turkic rulers of Iran who brought in people from other parts of the world, from other parts of Eurasia, people from the Caucasus region, people from Turkic parts of their empires and so on. And that's why today you have the situation where half of Iranians, they are of other ethnicities. Now, could Iranian, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, etc. break away from Iran due to separatist movements? Well, if the government of Iran becomes weak, then anything can happen. So the trick is, do not become weak. Okay, we have crossed 2 hours. Let's take a couple of questions. Spurti says, do you think importing minerals from other countries for use now and preserving our own resources until others run out could be considered a strategic approach? It's not a bad approach. If we have our own resources, if we have our own reserves of strategic minerals and whatnot, and we don't want to use them up because maybe they're limited, then it makes sense to import from other countries and import as long as it's possible. Right? Yeah, it makes sense. It's a prudent approach to have. I would agree with that. Yes. What else do we have? Let me take a couple of questions. Suresh says your subscriber count is not crossing 949K. We will discuss that next week. Yeah, you're right. Okay, let's take, maybe this is the final question. All right, let's take this as the final question. Dheeraj says, you have often stated that India does not seek to be a hegemon. Don't you think that it's necessary to be a hegemon for the superpower to remain one? Well, if you are in the position where you are a superpower, it means that you have reached there. What is the definition of superpower once again? Going back to first principles. First of all, let's define what superpower means. My definition, yours might differ, but my definition of superpower is that a superpower is a nation that can intervene militarily anywhere in the world at 60 minutes notice. It means that it has global power position capabilities. It means that it has a global military footprint. It means that it has military bases all across the world. That is pure hegemonic behavior. So the US is a superpower, and to remain a superpower, the US needs to be a hegemon, and it needs to continue to be a hegemon. Now, if India aspires to be a superpower, in that case, it means that we aspire to replace and displace the US as the superpower and become the global hegemon. It's not part of our culture. It's not something we've ever been like. But if we want to be a superpower, it means we have to do that. For that, you will have to be a hegemon. No question about it, right? Do we want to be that? Do that? Do we want to have global power projection capability? Do we want to have military bases on other nations' territory all across the world? I would like to ask you all: Is that what you want India to do? So I think it depends. See, we are a very democratic nation. I think the people have to decide what kind of nation we want to become. And if that's what you all want, then that's the kind of nation India should aspire to be. But for that, you have to take appropriate action. Right? Right. Okay, so we are at the end of today's live stream. Thank you so much. It was great fun. I really enjoyed all the questions. A very diverse set of questions within the theme of geopolitics. And I look forward to doing the same thing next week once again. So until next week, and we will discuss some other things next week. Next week is going to be a little different. So thank you so much. Take care. Good day, good night. And I will see you in the next live stream. Take care. Thank you.